Hello and welcome, my name is Trismegistus, and today we're going to be reading through and capturing the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 431, Gleba and Captivity. Posted by V. Hello, it's time to speak more about Gleba. Some changes and also something new. Okay, before we get into this one, I'm going to be able to do speculation a little bit on this because this change has literally just happened. This change also addresses the criticisms about Gleba. I like it. I think it does address those criticisms. But what I really wanted to be clear about is that if you're looking to avoid spoilers, you're getting to that territory. This really does explain how Gleba works pretty much now, unless they change it again. So, this is a bit of a spoilery one. It is also one that I wasn't sure they would actually talk about because they have been, fiddling with it until, well, I say it's literally today that one of these changes is coming in. So this was not one I was expecting them to necessarily to talk about. It is a huge one. And I can kind of talk about some stuff, but I say the video on the 14th, I'll probably go into a lot more detail on it because then I'm just a bit freer to talk. So yes, with that little caveat out the way, let's crack on, shall we? The Gleba Problems. In the last few months, we have been thinking about how to improve Gleba. There's always been this fundamental problem with a biologically oriented planet. The other things you produce in the game tend to not be organic. So it doesn't quite fit as easily as a planet based on making more iron or more electronic circuits. So what they're saying is that the fact that Gleba was biological in nature meant that it didn't naturally fit into that ecosystem that we've already got. So Volcanus, where you have things that help you with the basic iron and copper and all that sort of production, and Falgora, where you really focus on circuits and that sort of area of the game, those are much more natural slot-in fits to the current progression, the current production that you do, whereas Gleba is biological, and there is pretty much nothing biological in the game. You can burn wood and you can turn it into chests, but the only other biological thing is the biters, and you just go out and kill them. There always used to be this mechanic of collecting the science material from the biter nests and that whole thing. They got rid of that because that was really annoying. So the one mechanic that was pretty biological went quite a long time ago. So bringing it back in, it was always a bit of a, well, how does this really fit? It's outside of the normal systems. So they summarise this as, firstly, it's difficult to integrate the biological production chains into the rest of the traditional factory, as it's mostly metals there. So everything else is metals based, this is biological, doesn't mix. Finding useful things to unlock is difficult, especially compared to the metal and electronics-based producers like the foundry and electromagnetic plant. So a lot of your production is producing metals, which you use to produce circuits. Okay, so having a machine that comes in and helps with metal production, easy fit. Having a machine that comes in with and helps with circuit production, easy fit. A machine that messes about with spoilable items, where does that fit? That's one of the fundamental drivers of the problem of Gleba. And during the LAN party we had about a month ago, these problems were only confirmed. Plus, we've realised many more issues in other areas. And seeing people interact with Gleba put a lot more urgency on finding solutions. There is one change in particular which is significant and outlines our approach fairly well. Bacteria cultivation. One of the key issues on Gleba was that you'd be building two factories. One for agriculture, which would eventually output your science packs, and the usual iron and copper one, which would craft the factory and rocket parts. This just illustrates that very, very nicely. I'm not sure I can actually tell you what all of these are. I think you can probably guess a lot of them now, but they haven't given them names, and I don't, the embargo covers me telling you what they are, but I know what all of these are. So I think you can probably just work them out. But anyway, the caption says the normal crafting tree was completely severed from the organic one. I'll be honest, I hadn't really worked this out when I was kind of analysing, well, what's wrong here? Why isn't this quite as appealing as the other planets? The fact that these are completely separate chains wasn't really in my thinking, but it is very true because all of this stuff doesn't require any of this stuff, and all of this stuff doesn't require any of this stuff. The solution they've got is really elegant, and I have played with this bit of it, and this is actually fun. It's actually quite fun to do this part, but let's explain what it is. This was especially problematic as the agricultural factory didn't contribute in any way until you'd already delivered the science packs to your labs. And as we've learned, it is preferable to attempt to have each step you take feel rewarding and immediately useful. In other words, you're doing all this work to set up this system. It's got this quirk of the spoilage, which you've got to learn how to manage, and you've got to, use properly and work with properly. It involves you going out and interacting with pentapods and finding trees and doing the whole agricultural tower, and all of that is to produce science packs that don't really have anything to do with the rest of the factory that you've also got to produce on Gleba. It's not like, the two are interacting. You're just sort of building a load of stuff and building a load of stuff, and then eventually you get this science pack out of one side of it, and the other side of it lets you send that around, the solar system. So yeah, that's kind of what they're getting at, is that these are two independent systems, and really they needed bringing together. For a very long time, we had wanted to add a way to create iron and copper ore via agriculture, but we weren't quite sure how. Getting factory-scale amounts of minerals from plants felt just too unbelievable. We then got a picture of what is actually the solution to this, and the caption says stromatolites waiting to be mined. Kind of just to explain what stromatolites are. They're a very, very ancient kind of... technically they're not a single life form. They are like a colony, basically, of bacteria, but they are like one of the earliest forms of life on Earth, and they're actually responsible for essentially producing most of the oxygen we breathe. They were just there for millions of years, turning carbon dioxide into oxygen, essentially, and they basically live in these colonies. So let's go to the Wikipedia page and show you. So these are stromatolites. They're like rock. They look like rocks, basically, but they actually, as I say, are colonies of... Well, I think these ones might be dead, but they're colonies of bacteria that are just, processing, minerals and all that sort of stuff. Okay. And they've essentially brought these into the game. And that's what they are here. Now, just to be very clear, and I'm slightly highlighted by the embargo on what they've specifically said, but this is a stromatolite and this is a stromatolite. And think about the colours. That's kind of the hint I can give you, is that, so you've got these two stromatolites, and one is blue and one is orange. So I think you can guess what's going on there. The idea we've implemented is that bacteria can be found in the swamps where agricultural plants grow. Stromatolites are rock-like objects which have formed there over many years, acting as accumulated bacteria and ore for you to quickly obtain at the start. So in other words, you mine these and you get ore and bacteria out of them. Yumiko and jelly nuts can be processed with a small chance to obtain copper or iron bacteria respectively, reinforcing the feeling that there really isn't much in it. Gotta be honest, I don't understand that second part. I don't know what the feeling that there isn't much in it is meaning. But basically what they're saying is that Yumikos, when you harvest them, that's one of the fruit types on Gleba, that gives you copper, and when you harvest jelly nuts, that gives you bacteria. So copper bacteria and iron bacteria, not the ore themselves. And basically it's sort of reinforcing the idea that, it's part of an ecosystem, that, these bacteria are either living on those plants or they're part of their formation, part of their life cycle, something like that, that the two are linked together. So you've got the Yumiko and copper bacteria and copper itself, and the jelly nuts and iron bacteria and iron itself. So it's all sort of linking together, and it's a consistent ecosystem. Soon enough, you unlock the biochamber. And as you are the ingenious engineer, you replicate and grow the bacteria into a truly industrial amount. And what we see now is that in progress. The video is obviously just playing here with the caption saying, cultivating bacteria which turn into iron and copper ore. So basically when the bacteria spoil, because they are organic which spoils, they do turn into ore. So they don't turn into spoilage, they turn into ore. And so you can literally just have like a chest of them, leave it, and suddenly it becomes a chest of iron, which is quite a interesting and fun thing to do. And so I think I could, they've kind of explained it here, but these are the two products of the plants coming in, they're sort of what comes out of them essentially, and then you feed it into the biochamber with nutrients obviously, and it makes the bacteria. I'm not 100% sure what I can specifically say and specifically spoil effectively because of the embargo, but I would point out, so both of these are producing the bacteria, you can see that, right? Well, notice what's being fed into the machines is all I'll say, because this isn't showing you two machines of each producing the same recipe. And you can just, you can just intuit that because of where the inserters are grabbing from. I don't think I'm okay to show you exactly what the recipes are and what they produce and what have you, but you're actually seeing 4 recipes here is what I would say. And again, that's not me, I'm not, you can work that out, I think, just by looking at the inserters, but have a think about what the recipes might be and how it might work is all I would say if you want to do a bit of speculation. And on the 14th, if people are really interested and they can't work it out, I can talk about it in the live stream or something and just explain how those recipes work. But yeah, so it does sort of tell you this. It's not like super specific because basically, you're only feeding the green one into that one. You're not feeding it into that one. You're feeding in this other one. And the same here. So this is actually 4 recipes, okay? This results in the agriculture chain being immediately useful for creating iron and copper ore, which you can use for building more of your Gleba factory. And once you've got enough of that, you can just switch to a full-on agricultural science production. As a result, the steps you're taking are much more useful and less tedious. A beautiful little detail is that the bacteria spoils directly into ore, so it's a place where spoiling is helping you for once. Yes, so as I say, I won't go into the detail of how these recipes work. It is actually quite fun to play with, and it's a bit different, and it doesn't carry that quite the same level of, my stuff's going to spoil, and there's no kind of punishment to it in a sense. When the bacteria spoil, as it says, they just become ore, and that's kind of what you want to do. You want to kind of just stick it in a chest and have it spoil and become the ore that you want, and then you can process that oil. I keep saying oil, and then you can process that ore and use it, sort of thing. So it really does tie together, and it's a really clever move, this one, and I really like it because, as I say, when you're on Fulgori, getting a machine that takes scrap and gives you this useful circuit stuff that you want. And when you're on Volcanus, you've got access to this super hard material that lets you process more metals really, quickly. And so bringing the two together in Gleba with a bacteria that is, related to the fruit and produces the ore is really nice and clever. And it does make them feel tied together. It does make it feel like a single thing that you're doing. In other words, in order to get your basic factory up and running and doing that stuff, you need to work with the agricultural system. It's not like it's a tacked on separate thing of, you need mining drills to, make the iron ore or get iron ore and all that sort of stuff. You can use the agricultural system. The reward. It's nice when an activity is fun, but it's much better when it's also meaningful and leads somewhere. Obtaining powerful factory improvements is how we like to be motivated in Factorio. There's a handful of improvements to be unlocked by the Agricultural Science Pack, like the stack inserter, the Spidertron and the rocket turret, or more efficient recipes for space platforms. But there is one specific new technology. So, that is 100% confirmation that the stack inserter is unlocked on Gleba, the Spidertron is unlocked on Gleba, and the rocket turret is unlocked on Gleba. It also does give you this, it says, efficient recipes for space platforms. So there are some other things related to space platforms that make them more efficient. And you're kind of getting into the core of why Gleba was a bit third place. And I've tried to explain this. I don't think the mechanics before on Gleba were bad. Whether you like them or not was personal preference. The problem was that what you got was not as good at the point you would want it as the other two. So, in other words, what you got from Gleba was the stack inserter. Well, stack inserter is really like end game thing because it's, you need enormous production for the stack inserter to be this like amazing thing, especially since, as we know, you get the green belt on Volcanus. So, I don't know about you, but my instinct is to go with faster belts before talking about stacking stuff. So it feels like an end game item. Not that it's unuseful and it's great, I'm sure. I haven't, really used it. But when you're doing a mega base, when you're doing enormous numbers, when you want to move things quickly, and that's why it's Gleba, a stack inserter is where you go. But I don't want to do that necessarily when I'm literally just got a factory that can do 60 science a minute. Spidertron and Rocket, well, Spidertron gets undermined quite a lot, if I'm honest, by the whole remote view. You can do so much remotely with bots that one of Spidertron's uses is kind of gone away. But also, it's a powerful weapon system. How early do you need that? If you're going to your first planet, you're talking about being relatively early in the biter evolution. So how quickly do you need Spidertron? And also, of course, Gleba is where you've got, and I suppose, Gleba is where you've got the pentapod that's the, inspiration for it, and you can possibly use it to fight pentapods, I don't know. But, it's like debate, it's like a self-useful thing, if you see what I mean. It's a weapon system that's useful on the planet it's unlocked on. Well, if I don't go there, I don't need it. Do you see what I mean? It's that sort of a problem. The rocket turret is great. They are great fun. But it's like a more powerful weapon system again. Do you really need it at that state? And all it's doing is launching rockets. There's nothing like extra, it's not like the Tesla turret, which gives you the stun ability. But also, in terms of space platforms, it's like a really powerful tool. And you can probably imagine, therefore, it's not necessarily needed for the early platforms. You can use it, obviously. But, you've seen platforms with gun turrets is fine for a lot of stuff. So sticking rocket turrets on them, do you need to do that immediately? No. And this is where I say you get into this problem and say this is what it was about for me, is that if I'm looking at the list of techs I can get on each planet, Glebas are ending up as, well, I don't really need that yet. I don't really want that yet. I can use that later. Great, but I don't want it now. And so it ends up being the third place choice all the time. And it's not because they're bad things. It's just it's like you take a load of endgame stuff and put it on one planet, and then you don't really need it until the end game. So that was always the problem. That was the problem with it, basically, for me. We'll come on to the other part of the problem in a minute. Biter Captivity. Bioflux is a combination of processed Yamako and jelly nut. It's crafted on Gleba, and it can be used to capture biter spawners on Nalvis. Boom. So this was the really big mechanic. There was a couple of questions in my Q&A of like, is there anything new, and how much do we know, and what else is there, and that sort of thing. This was one of the big mechanics. This has been in there since the LAN party. This isn't a new addition. The ability to basically capture the spawners is a whole different system. It also, if you think about it, is linking the two planets really well. That is something that is a little bit lacking in the other planets when you think about it, is that there isn't a thing, you sort of want the Foundry and you want the EMP on Nalvis, but you don't necessarily have to have them there. You could send the products, instead. This is like an exclusive tie-in between Gleba and Nalvis because, biters are on Nalvis and the Bioflux is made on Gleba. So you've got to ship it to Nalvis to do this. And again, that's sort of both a brilliant thing in that it really ties the two planets together, but it again says to you, right, well, you need to do this complex logistics chain in order for Gleba to be like a good planet to do. So it's like, well, why not just leave that till later? Again, so it's like a thing that's really great, but it's an interesting, but it's, more feels like, well, let's build everything up first, and then do it, you see. So, a capture robot loaded with doses of Bioflux solution is shot from a rocket launcher. The capture robot then latches onto a spawner, and soon enough the spawner is rendered harmless and docile. And here it is in action. This is one of the best looking things I would say they've added. The animations here are awesome. This bot looks just brilliant. The way it's sort of wiggling over the top is just really cool as it's doing its thing. You can actually sort of see it pumping this bioflux fluid in, although this one doesn't rotate, which I would quite like a little animation as if the auger was pumping the fluid in. But yeah, so this is the thing here. It does say on the caption, capture time reduced for demonstration, and this is sped up quite a bit. It does take a while. Now what you do, as it says, is you stick it in a rocket launcher, and you've basically rocket launched them at the spawners, and they grab the spawner, and it eventually captures it. While it's being captured, you obviously have to deal with the mobile biters, that are around. So if you remember, we have target filtering and target prioritization. So if you're doing any kind of turret creep and you're wanting to capture the nests, then you've got to put filters on all of your turrets. You can obviously still shoot worms that they're not part of this, and the mobile biters as well. But of course, the thing you do with turret creep, the thing you do with when you're getting rid of spawners, is that you try and take out the spawners quickly, because they're the things that produce the mobs. They're the things that produce the actual biters that are the things attacking you. So you want to get rid of them quickly. It does also have, it does also mean one of the strategy I have used. I haven't done this a lot, to be honest with you, but poison capsules are quite useful, because you can obviously lob them in, get rid of the worms, come back again. It clears out the individual biters, but the poison capsules don't touch the spawners. It gives you some interesting strategic choices and things. And it also comes back again to this thing of, well, you remember they made them tougher. Part of the reason is this, in the sense that they need to stick around. You need to have spawners that don't just melt as soon as you look at them. It's not quite that, it's not quite as simple as that. There is other things to it as well. But basically the idea of, if you turn up and you wanting to capture them and you've accidentally left your personal laser defense on, and it wipes out all the spawners straight away because they're all really squishy, it's actually a bit of a pain in the bum. So what you really want is them be a bit stronger, so you've got time to turn your personal laser defense off. So there is a little bit of that to it. But say this animation, I absolutely love this animation. It's so, squishy, and it's got these little wires that it's forcing into the thing, and then it's got these are actual canisters that in the next part you'll see that they squelch the food in and all this sort of stuff, and it really is a very nice and evocative animation. Once captured, the spawner no longer hatches biters, and biter eggs can be collected with inserters for further processing or disposal. The disposal part is interesting there. It obviously does sort of work as a way of controlling the biters as well. I'm not entirely sure you kind of want to do this, and maybe not. But effectively, these are then under your control, and they produce the eggs, which are in theory the actual biters spawning. And so if you just get rid of the eggs, these are effectively just neutralized spawners. So, you could think of it in terms of maybe you don't want the eggs for processing, but you also want to keep them around in case you want them later. And so you can just get rid of the eggs, and it's just getting rid of them, basically, if you see what I mean. And, they're then under your control, but without you, having to worry about doing the processing. Does that make sense? So you can just go around sort of shooting these nests and capturing them, and then just keeping them tame, essentially. So what we're actually seeing here on this here is, you see this coming on the bottom. This is a bioflux again, and it's basically being fed into the actual captured nest. You see it's been put in there. It does create this, so this gloopy, pushing fluid in type animation for this bit here. When it rolls around, there you go. So that starts animating when it's got the fluid in, and that's one of the ways you can tell it's doing its thing, as well as obviously this starts doing, I don't know, what do we want to call that? Pulsing animation? If you think a bit closely about these, they're a bit icky. What is that actually doing to the nest? And it produces eggs. So as I say, there's a lot of, it's that dark humour stuff again that I quite enjoy in Factorio. But don't think too closely about what that's actually doing, because it's a bit pulsatey. Yes, and that's basically what you do. So the eggs then are just, you literally just feed in the spawner and it produces eggs, and then you can use the eggs for stuff. So that part of it's not that complicated. It can be complicated doing this for really big, areas of nests. So if you go out, because this is one of these things, as I say, there's the whole thing of making them tougher and all that sort of stuff. And I've kind of been trying to say that you need to be strategic about your choices around whether you go out and clear nests. And this is the second part of why. The first one was you don't want to evolve them too much because they might get too tough for you given your tech level. The other one is obviously if you clear out everything really close to you, then the nests you're going to have to get when you want this to happen, when you want to capture them, will be way out, and there'll be these great big, those great big agglomerations of huge nests. Now you can wait for new ones to spawn in and just send them in, and those will almost certainly be smaller and more controllable, so you can do that. But that means not having walls. We would always protect against them with walls, basically, wouldn't we? So they would come in, and instead of being able to spawn their new nest somewhere we wanted, walls would kill them off. Well, if you want to capture those smaller groups, you've kind of got to leave them, and you've got to think about how you're going to manage that. Do you wait for a group come in, it spawns in 3 nests and 2 worms, so you go and lob some poison to kill off the worms, then you build a fence around it essentially to keep them in, and that deals with the mobile biters. But the actual spawners, you leave until you've got this capture thing. You could start to think in terms of long-term strategy for managing the spawners. Because as I say, if you clear out everything that's really close to you early on, and you probably want to do that anyway, but you get to a point, where you get these gigantic areas of nests, and dealing with capturing them is really tricky because there's so many mobs spawning, given the period of the time, where you are in the game that you're wanting to do this, that it's hard to manage that because, this does take time, and there are still going to be, actual worms and mobile biters and all that sort of stuff around for you to deal with while it's happening, and then you've got to put your stuff in. And obviously, if you capture, say, because they can be really close, those those nests, and you've got to somehow get all of this, this bioflux into them. So, do you want to cull off a few to make your life easier, or what, really? So, it becomes all very interesting in how you deal with biters, basically, on Nauvis. As long as you keep feeding it bioflux in frequent intervals, the spawner will remain that way. Otherwise, it goes rogue and returns back to its natural form, spawning hostile biters again. Yeah, so literally just when it runs out of food, there is a grace period where it just sort of sits there for a bit, but eventually it will just reject your control. All of this goes away and it becomes basically a normal biter nest again and starts spawning biters. And of course, it'll attack all of your belts and all of that stuff that's around it. And that might then cause a cascade failure where it, it destroys all of the belts carrying flux, and that means your other spawners aren't getting fed, and they then go rogue, and so it's a cascade failure. So you do get these interesting management situations. Of course, as I say, you can do target filtering. So one of the things you can do is kind of manage the area. A bit like we've been thinking about with the pentapods where they hatch out of the eggs, and you can just manage that area with a bunch of turrets on it, and so long as they've not got splash damage, it won't damage the spawners, and so you can just then... One of the things, and this was saying about I can do speculation in this one, one of the things I don't know and would be interesting is whether you can load the launchers into missile turrets. I say I've done very little of this. I've messed about with it just to see it in action because it's kind of cool and kind of weird and kind of gross. But I don't know if you can actually put the capture things in missile turrets, so I don't know if you can have them sort of sat there waiting as like a fallback emergency thing, that one of these goes rogue and then it recaptures it or something like that. Maybe you get a spoilage problem with all your bioflux and it all backs up and you can't feed them, and before you get there a few of them go rogue, and so you have a turret that's ready to just shoot the things at them, and a bit of crowd control on the stuff it spawns. So I don't know to what extent you can do all of that stuff. I imagine you can, and it would work that way. But say it sort of creates a whole new interesting system of management that's very different to the current production chains. So here we go, and this is one of the big things. Biter eggs can be immediately used for improvements to agriculture, so it can make agricultural stuff better. Crafting productivity module 3s, or because we felt like Gleba unlocks aren't motivating us enough. Now, prod module 3 is obviously very powerful. I can't really quite say why it's only prod module 3 and not other module 3s. You can probably work out why that is, but it's sort of coming back again to this problem of why Gleba first, okay? Because prod module 3s are really powerful, really useful. The building that you need to make modules in really great quantities and, really take use of them is over on Fulgora. So why come here first, unlock the ability to do prod module 3s if you haven't already been to Fulgora to get the EMP? Because that's the machine you want to do modules, okay? Now, the other thing to it, of course, as well, is that because we all do big bases, we all know what we're doing. I'd say all of us. You may be new, you may not have played the game through, but a lot of players who've played the game before, they've played it through, they'll unlock things like Prod Module 3, and they'll unlock Blue Belt, they'll unlock Green Assemblers. You don't really need any of those to finish the game, You can finish it with Red Belt. In fact, you can finish it with Yellow Belt. You can finish it without Prod Module 3, just use a few Prod Module 2, or just handcraft a couple to go in your rocket. You don't need Prod Module 3s to do the main core of the game. And so that you've got that problem again of like, Gleba has got a module on it that is amazing for the end game. How useful is it for the intermediate game, for the mid game, for the early game? And therefore, how does that make it a first planet to go through? And I keep coming back to make sure I emphasise the point that is the point. It's not that Prod Module 3 is bad or Stack Inserter is bad, they're great. They are late game things, in my opinion. And so if I'm looking at the thing to say, well, which planet do I go do first, I'm picking the one with the gigantic prod bonuses. Okay? In fact, the two with the gigantic prod bonuses. And this didn't really have that. It didn't have an equivalent for that. And that's what we're about to come on to. A new laboratory. Combined with some other items, the egg can be grown and hatched into a mutated laboratory. Now there's a sentence. As you'll be able to read below, the work on the graphics has only just started, but here you can see a work-in-progress version of it from Erindal and Jersey. And here we have it, the new guy. Caption just says work-in-progress graphics of the new BioLab, subject to change. So, this is brand new, and so that means I can do a bit of speculating about it. One of the things that is interesting, just immediately, it's quite a bit bigger. I think this is, what's that? Is that 5 by 5? And that actually solves one of the problems. Well, it's not a problem, obviously, but with regular laboratories, they're obviously only 3 by 3, and we were actually having to feed in more materials than like a normal belt setup would do. So there were all we were all going to have to do some quite funky things with belts, or have loads and loads of chests and all that sort of stuff. And particularly with spoilage. Spoilage is an extra, and that's why this has an extra one here, because that's for spoilage. Spoilage has an extra thing that you've got to take it out of the labs, which we've never had to do before. So this is bigger, so that means it's going to be a lot easier to just feed everything in. But it also means it can have more beacons on it, so there can be more beacon action going on. I think it says it has more slots. I don't think it says how many. It might say, oh no, it has 4 slots. So there again, it has more slots on it for putting actual modules into the machine. So it's one of these bigger ones, so it gets more bonus from all of the other stuff. The other thing is it doesn't really have a productivity bonus. It has what would you call it? A consumption bonus. So it only uses half the amount of science to do the same equivalent science to a lab. So it is like a prod bonus in a sense, but not quite. So it's more like I think it's and this is I'm getting to do speculation. I think it stacks with productivity. So I think it means that for every one lab produced, you would produce say two sciences, as it were, with a 50% prod bonus. I think that stacks with a consumption bonus, and so you would only actually consume half of a science pack to do 1 science pack's worth of work, which would give you 2 science packs worth of science. Does that make sense? So it's like giving you another axis on productivity that's separate. So you could also put in the prod bonus. Potentially these could be quality beacons, I guess, and I don't know how it interacts with that quality system. And does maybe, is quality something that it improves? Does its consumption bonus, as I'm calling it, is that improved by quality? Can a quality BioLab, do more? Or maybe there is no quality BioLab because it's one of the organic ones, and it doesn't make sense. But does that how it works? Is there a quality version of this that improves that sort of consumption bonus, or rather than giving it a prod bonus or a speed bonus or something like that? It doesn't actually say, I don't think, what the crafting speed is. So does it have an inbuilt crafting speed? Does it benefit from lab speed bonus, or does it not? Because you could see it doing both. Maybe there's a separate infinite research or something for the BioLab speed bonus or something like that. So this introduces all sorts of extra things that could be added. I'll be honest, because it's so late, I'm not sure we'll get a lot of those. They might be, if there is ever a, I mean, there'll be a 2.1 just purely because they'll fix a load of bugs and they'll call it a 2.1. I think, that's not, that's not a surprise because that's how software development works. But if there's a 2.1 that introduces features, could it add maybe some of those bonuses and, expand this even more as making it a fully featured thing? Because particularly something like that, adding extra sciences would really work well with, you've got your factory, it's already built, here's just some more things to research. In terms of the look of this, I think this looks pretty good. It's a little subtle, I would say, that, we'll come on to this bit here. This is actually like a centrifuge. So one of the things you often want to do with certain, particularly for biological functions, is you want to separate things out. And because they will have different weights and different densities, if you put them in a centrifuge, you essentially will separate like the heavy things out to the bottom and the light things out to the top. And so what you can do is you can increase the gravity, so increase that separation by spinning it, and you're familiar with a centrifuge where you spin it around and the heavy stuff moves to the end and the light stuff to the top. And I say it's a very common operation in fact, this might be, it says Shutterstock. So this is one spinning around here. I don't want to play it because, it's a copyright free thing. But basically you would put the little vials, your little test tubes in around the edge and you spin it and it separates things out. And that's what's going on here. So this bit is a sort of centrifuge, very labby, very biological thing. And what it's doing, if you can see, is it's loading the first sample there, giving it a spin, and then taking the sample off with this arm. So it's really intricate, really nice little detailed animation. We've got this thing, which comes in from this, you see, because it has got a spawner in it, okay? But notice how this is just the out in the field, it's latched on, it's doing whatever it does, bumping or massaging or whatever that is, whereas this is more like constructed. It's got a base to it and it's at a fixed angle and it's nice and aligned, and this is cleaner. And do you see what I mean? It's like the in-lab version of it versus the in-field version of it. This obviously then, can you see the pumpy auger, the screw auger thing going on here? Obviously that's that one there. Yeah, so you've got similarity of design elements. We've then got the pipes and stuff that remind me so much of Akira, the big conduits basically. And in the middle here, and I'd say this is the only bit of it. I mean, it says it's work in progress. I think it looks amazing. The bit that I would say probably needs a little bit of work is making it clear that there is a spawner in here, because it gets a bit hidden as to what that is. That is in the middle of there. It's a little bit lost, I would say, but that would be it. You've got the lightning going on, and from the normal lab, you've got that structural thing that the lab has. So it's very nice tying up of design elements between the two. You've even got like the fan thing that you get on on the silo and stuff like that. So really, really in keeping with the Factorio design aesthetic, the Factorio world. It's even got, you see, this here is a bit like the steam engine, where it has those gears on the side and it has the pistony pumpy thing. Obviously that's sort of on there, but less visible basically. So yeah, so I really like the design of it. If they put it in like this, I'd be more than happy. I don't know that it needs a lot of work, but yeah. The BioLab can only be used on Nalvis, as the organism inside would die on other planets. But in turn, it only consumes half the amount of science packs for any given research. It can process all science packs just like the normal lab. It also has 4 slots for modules. This means that it's a powerful unlock, and obtaining it early on should feel quite rewarding. Whether we finally broke the imbalance of Volcanus and Folgora being clearly superior to Gleba, we will see. But at least the difference is much, much less stark now. And yeah, that would kind of be my reaction to it. As I say, this is Not in the version I've not played with this. I mean, I don't think I'd really played with the bit that it's about to go and talk to. I don't think I'd sort of spawned it in a cheat game, but I hadn't really done all of that anyway. If the intermediate planets are the intermediate, middle part of the game, this is like the end of the middle. So yeah, so this machine gets me excited, I would say, to go to Gleba and maybe do that first, because if you're going to say, right, well, it's effectively like a force multiplier on all the other planets as well. Because if it's making it so that you only have to consume half the number of packs to do any of your sciences, then that doubles whatever you're doing on Volcanus and Fulgura. If you're producing 60 science a minute or whatever it is on those other planets, if you've got this guy going, you're actually producing the equivalent of 120 just straight away without any prod bonus, and it gets more prod bonus. Without any speed bonus, it gets more speed bonus. Without any, if it's, got any bonuses affected with it. So this is a really powerful machine. Now, I won't explain it now, but they did have something that was almost getting here in the game. That is the bit that I have looked at. I didn't actually get to play with it because I didn't get that far, but there is they were kind of heading in this direction. And if this is the end result, then I am pleased with that. It also kind of justifies doing the complicated logistics chain of capturing biters and all that sort of stuff. That sort of makes a bit more sense to me now if the end result is this machine. It doesn't mention, and we can't see it being put in here, that you have to feed this. So I don't think that's part of this machine. I think it's just fine without, this feeding mechanism. But yeah, we'll have to see. A bit of backstory. You may notice that the BioLab above looks awfully similar to the captive biter spawner. Until very recently, that's pretty much what it was. We've now got the concept art for Arundel. I once again repeat my plea to please do an art book. I'd love to have these concept art and in-game art and abandoned concepts and stuff like that. This is such good, such interesting stuff, I'll be honest. It's interesting how close these ones are. Some of them do deviate quite a bit from what they are. But, this capture bot... Can I see it flying over here? The capture bot here, you can't really see it because it's so quick. I might be able to pause it, actually. So that's the capture bot. I love it's got like the drifty smoke trail, like it's just moving along. Yes, anyway, so that's a capture bot there. Okay, and if you look, it's really very close to this concept artwork. They've managed to really capture that, what that was going for. I don't know about you, it also looks like a spider a bit, like on a sort of a nest thing. It's an interesting sort of, because obviously it's come from Gleba, where you got the pentapods, you see. So interesting design notes. But yeah, so this is the captured spawner. So that is that one there. Okay. Now this is something that is in the version of the game I'm playing with. And this is the synthetic biter spawner. Okay, and this is what it's going to go on to explain. But you notice how it's got, the same basic things to it. And that a lot of these have come into this. And I would say probably what they have done is essentially taken that model and kind of stuck the frame around it. Yeah, because this is in the version that I've been playing, and this is what they're going on to explain. And it just says capture and wise concept art from Arundel. We had an entity in the game called the synthetic biter spawner. We added it because we felt it would be nice to be able to just place your own spawners anywhere in order to scale up biter egg production in the typical Factorio fashion of rows and rows of machines. So yeah, this was like the ultimate solution. I was saying you had to have this choice of, do I kill the nest? Do I capture the nest? How do I, productionize this? It's small scale, or I have to go out and get these really big nests and what have you. And the ultimate answer then was a synthetic version of this, a synthetic spawner, that basically you could then place down in rows and columns and make a factory with, basically. So it was a completely separate entity. As we were trying to simplify some things and find rewards for Gleba, the synthetic biter spawner started to lose its significance. And at the same time, we felt like some powerful Gleba unlock is missing. At first, we changed it to be more like a universal crafter, giving it the ability to craft Nalvis science packs, solid fuel and rocket fuel, all with a productivity bonus similar to the foundry and electromagnetic plant. However, the recipes felt a bit forced and the bonus wasn't that great compared to its rivals, but it was something. So I'll be honest, I would kind of debate that last point about it not being comparable, because this is the end chain building, this is like, science packs, and this was what I was playing with. I would say I was a bit underwhelmed with it as a thing. Again, one of the reasons I'm saying I've not played a lot of it is because I've been focusing on making the map that we're going to work on the live stream, and of course that really requires me to do a nice Nalvis base. That's what I'm going for, and so a lot of my playtime, which has to fit around my job as well, has been focused on getting that together. And when they're completely overhauling Gleba and doing things like this one that I explain later on, that basically meant I had to scrap that whole playthrough, that I'd been recording. Not that that's not a complaint, I'm just explaining why I've not done as much of the mid and end game stuff as maybe other people will have. But basically, yeah, when fiddling about with it, I have got this cheat game basically where I can just spawn anything in. It did feel a bit meh, it was like the prod bonus made it, oh yeah, that's worthwhile. It didn't feel unique and interesting, I would say, was more the thing. Like the bacteria, that's an interesting change that ties all the little biosystems together and all this sort of thing. Taking the synthetic spawner from, right, well, I just want to be able to make more eggs, to, oh, well, it can make the usual stuff, science pack, solid fuel, rocket fuel. Yeah. So the caption on this one just says the discarded synthetic biter spawner in its science pack crafter form. And yeah, so obviously they're feeding in sulfur, red circuits, and engines, and making blue science packs. So it is literally just like a level 2 crafting machine in a sense. It looks like one of the things with this, when you look at this thing here, it looks more rounder, it looks more sort of plump in a sense. What you don't get conveyed by the fact that it's black and white is this sickly colour that they've given it. And also whoever's come up with the idea of this, the pumpy thing, giving it the whole mass pulsates and the veins kind of stick out and these eyes bulge, not eyes are, but these membranes bulge and as it pumps, They're a sick genius, whoever's come up with that, because that's very horrible, in my opinion. And this is one thing to say. The fact that it's a bit hidden in here, because it is sort of doing this, if you really look at it. It is doing the whole thing pulses, but it's a bit lost. You can't really see it. And you hear the whole wave of pulse of squish going on is just really repulsive and really awesome. Along the way, we started dreaming about turning it into a full-on laboratory. The graphics, however, would be far from a proper visual solution, so we put our heads together with Albert and Erendel, and we decided to make a last-minute adjustment, making a proper, semi-organic BioLab, which would include more of the typical lab structure, which is that mesh, that structure around it, basically. The finished version will be in Space Age on release day. So in other words, it's not the final version, so I'd be perfectly happy with this. I'd quite like something just to bring out the squelchy, encapsulated spawner in the middle, but otherwise, yeah. Because this means we've discarded the synthetic biter spawner, we have added a way to craft the captive biter spawner, which you could then place anywhere on Nalvis you like. So you can still scale their production up conveniently. So just to explain, so what they're saying is that rather than build this synthetic spawner and place those in your nice neat rows, instead you can simply craft this guy. Okay, so you can craft this spawner. The reason I was referring to having to feed this and what have you is because, well, as you can see on this, you didn't have to feed it. You didn't have to give it nutrients. If we're instead able to spawn this one everywhere, to me that says we're going to have to keep giving it the nutrients, which makes sense because, that chain would die away. You wouldn't need to bring in the bioflux to Nalvis if these guys didn't need feeding in the crafted version. But you are crafting this, I believe, and that then needs feeding, so you need that chain, basically. But they can only obviously still be built on Nalvis. This technology is unlocked at the last planet, so it won't get trivialised too early, and the captive spawners you make will have their own quirks. That's interesting. I wonder what that could be. Again, I get to speculate. So, yeah, I don't know what that would mean. My guess would be that the captive ones, well, first off, I would hope that they would colour them differently so that they do look different but kind of don't give themselves too much work. I say that, it's probably a massive change that takes someone, a week or something. But, maybe give them a different colour, but also maybe they spawn biters, like without going rogue. So just every so often, one will pop up. It would be really cool as well. I think maybe, I don't know, but these could be percentage-based recipes, like the percentage of number of eggs that you get, because that would give you, the eggs do hatch into biters, is the point. If left to spoil, they hatch into biters. So if you're getting variable numbers of biter eggs and you're only consuming them at a fixed rate, you've got to do something with the excess. So you've got to work out how to manage the excess. And if it is a percentage-based thing, say, you get between, say, 10 and 20 or whatever it is, and you build your base based on 10, you're going to get, say, an average of 5 extra on average, and that's quite a lot to deal with, So you've got to work out, what are you going to do with those? Are you going to, process them in some way? You're going to turn them into other spawners, or what? What are you going to do with those eggs? And that might be something they're referring to. But as I say, I think it's more likely that they'll spawn. Now, I can't remember, could set it up this way, but, the way the game spawns things is it's like, a random chance of small, medium, big, and behemoth. So another thing they could do is it didn't just spawn biters, it could spawn like the max level of biter. So you could suddenly have like 4 behemoths in the middle of your, your base area. Bit like the pentapod eggs, where, you get them spawning in and it becomes a management problem. And particularly if it was behemoths that it spawned, they're obviously really tough. So you need to be able to take care of them, or they're going to destroy all of your stuff. And as we know, as I mentioned with this, if they destroy your belts, you can get cascade failure, where suddenly the others are spoiling and you're getting more behemoths spawning, and it just all goes to hell, basically. So yeah, so that would be interesting. There could be all sorts of things. I mean, another thing, it could give you bacteria, maybe. Maybe it'll link back to that, because you're feeding in bioflux, which is from the organic stuff. So maybe every so often you get a random bit of bacteria, and you've just got to somehow deal with that. I don't know. Another one might be that it has something to do with pentapods, that maybe, you could... I don't see how that would work, because the pentapod's eggs are a separate thing, and I don't know that the the wrigglers and stuff would survive, but it could be interesting if it did spawn the other beasties. But yeah, my bet would be on that it's a randomised thing, and that it can every so often a artificial one can spawn in just a biter, just one pops up out of nowhere and just munches on your belts and stuff. Conclusion. The idea of capturing biters has been in our heads for a long time, and in Space Age since the very first serious brainstorming going into the initial prototype. Biter eggs also make use of the spoiling mechanic, as they spoil into live biters. The biter-based lab has had many uses before, and we believe now it has found its true form. As I say, my sort of reaction to Gleba when I first did it, I mentioned this on the video and did try to explain it, was not so much about spoilage as a mechanic or any of that stuff, although the fact that they've addressed that is not addressed that, but addressed the whole desync between, like material production and biological production. I think that's really neat. But the fact that you kind of weren't getting the same sort of, or what felt like the equivalent sort of a reward from Gleba. It felt like it was all this extra work to get some stuff that I didn't really need when I was first considering going to any of the planets. It wasn't that you didn't want them eventually, it was just that you didn't want them first. And so if this lab is unlockable really fairly early, that you can get it quite quickly, and that therefore making it and shipping it to Nalvis and that therefore making bioflux, shipping it to Nalvis, doing all this stuff, that feels like it's going to be quite a useful thing, and it acts as a multiplier on what you're doing on your other planets. Having this in place is going to halve all of the science that you need to make on all the other planets. That's enormous, that's really, really good as a reward. Over the last month, we've improved the experience on Gleba in many other ways. Changing map generation, cleaning up some graphics, tweaking many, if not all recipes, making the enemies less crazy, adding new ways to obtain resources, and making the rewards a lot more appealing. A lot of the changes are too detailed for the context of Friday Facts, but we'd like to express our deep gratitude for the feedback from our testers, which has been immensely helpful. It mentions there about the map generation, changing map generation. I think I'm okay to say this. One of the other problems was that it didn't generate a spawn area. There wasn't a specific area when it generated a map that was intended for you to start on. So, like on Volcanus, where it has that safe area that has no demolishers, and on, Nalvis, you have a safe area where there's no biters. But on Gleba, there wasn't that. You didn't have a nice little starting area to get you started. And so people had to go out and hunt and find the actual fruits and stuff. And so you can actually start with the things that you need in easy reach, in the same way that you have iron, copper, coal, stone, and a water patch guaranteed on Nalvis. It didn't really have that on Gleba. They hadn't put that in. And so one of the friction points people were having was the whole, where can I find this stuff? And it would just be off, miles away, basically. So yeah, that was actually a really huge change, and, it kind of undersells it a bit now. Speaking of testers, please be aware that the content or press embargo ends on the 14th of October. So, if you want to avoid spoilers, please keep it in mind, as there are no restrictions on what they can show. And this is the other change that they kind of announced to us beta testers. Originally, obviously there was the embargo that ended on the 14th. It came with a request not to show the final planet and the end game. Okay, that part of the request has been dropped, so people can now show you, the end game, the final planet, all of that, the complete content of what's in the game. I would point out, obviously, they are changing things, so I kind of don't envy anyone who's doing guides and stuff if they're trying to take that approach, because they are tweaking stuff and they are putting things in like last minute. So yeah, people will have to kind of work around that. As that's not what I've been doing. I've been prepping a save file we can use. The basic point there is people can show you stuff. I'm not going to. I have decided, and this is probably shooting myself in the foot as a content creator, but I'm a tiny content creator. It doesn't really matter. Getting the first video out on the final planet and the end game and how it all works doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't affect this channel. I'm just grateful that any of you watch this stuff at all. So I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to stick with what I've been doing. I will be not talking about the final planet and not talking about the end game until we get past the 21st of October. And also, talking about my content plans, the aim is to say I have been recording that file preparation as a Let's Play style, where I will edit out the spoilery bits and all of that sort of stuff, and possibly tedious things where I'm just setting up, mines, etc. So that will go live as a series of Let's Plays. There'll be quite a lot of them because I'm doing them as quite short bursts of gameplay. And so you might get 2 or 3 a day even. But the idea with that is that it's quite heavily edited, nice short episodes, and to get you up to speed, because what I'm sure you're really interested in is the new stuff, and this is just the prep to get there. Okay, so I am talking about things, and I already know some of the stuff I've been talking about is wrong because of these changes, but that's kind of the nature of a beta. So yes, my content plan is that I will be doing my Q&A video on the 14th. That's the big one. That will not talk about Aquila and Endgame. I'll put that in a separate video. I'll also do a live stream on the 14th in order to pick up any other questions or to kind of show you what I can show you in the game. I will be putting out Let's Plays, in the preceding week, basically, hopefully, if I can get them edited, where I prep that save file. They will probably overlap. There will probably be a period where you've not seen the end of the Let's Plays, but I'm doing the live streams. The live streams will cover this. I'm still planning on doing the poll. I will put that up. The most popular choices where we'll go on day 1, second on day 2, and third on day 3. This may change your pick. That poll will go up on Sunday at 6 p.m. UK time on Sunday after this Friday Facts. So yeah, that's your opportunity to pick the planet. And now Gleba, where everyone was joking about it being a punishment going there because it was horrible, is Gleba now the best planet to go to? So yes, so that's my content plans for thing. I'm not really changing them. I'm not going to talk about the end game and final planet. So if you don't mind spoilers on the intermediates, then they'll be fun. Then then you can watch those. If you don't want any spoilers at all, I don't even know why you're watching this, but if you don't want any spoilers at all, then don't watch any of that. But if you want to avoid Endgame and Final Planet spoilers, my stuff will be safe for that, okay? Captivate us with your least spoiled ideas in the usual places. And don't argue whether Bioflux is a drug or food. It's obviously... I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts and might consider coming back for another one. If you'd like to chat about the Friday Facts, then you can find me live streaming Factorio every weekend over on my Twitch channel at Trismegistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Volcanus and Volcora.